ex-boyfriend filmed her working as a waitress to humiliate her. Then a billionaire called her babe. The phone was already recording before she even turned around. The little red light blinked like a warning she never got. He held it steady, angled low, catching her from across the dining room as she balanced 3 plates along her forearm and set them down with the kind of grace you only earn through months of quiet repetition. Her hands didn't shake. Her smile didn't slip. She placed the last dish, adjusted a napkin, and whispered, "Enjoy your evening," like she meant it. And she did. She always did. Then she heard his voice. "Look at this, my ex, carrying plates for strangers. Tell me that's not the funniest thing you've seen all week." Her spine went rigid, not from surprise, from recognition. She knew that voice the way you know the sound of a door slamming in a house you once called home. She turned slowly, and there he was, standing near the entrance, with his phone aimed at her like a weapon. His lips curled into that same self-satisfied grin she had spent 3 years learning to survive. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She kept her chin up, her hands steady, and her heart breaking in places no one could see. He wanted the world to laugh at her. He wanted to remind her who he thought she was. But what he did not expect was the man in the far corner of the dining room to set down his glass, rise from his chair, and walk straight toward them. A man she had never seen before, a man whose next word would change the entire direction of her life. Babe. But we will get to that. Hello, family. Welcome to Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis. If you are new here, please subscribe and leave a like. It means the world to us. Share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a story. Thank you as you do so. Now sit back, relax, and let us dive into this one. Trust me, you are not ready for where this story goes. The air inside Nadia's apartment felt thick that evening, though both windows were cracked open and a warm breeze tried its best to slip through the curtains. It didn't help. Nothing helped lately. The walls felt closer than they used to. The ceiling felt lower. Even the light from the lamp on the nightstand seemed dimmer, like the room itself had learned to match her mood. She sat on the edge of her bed with her knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them, fingers locked together like she was trying to hold herself in one piece. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand again, then a third time. Keelan, 9 missed calls, 4 text messages, 2 voice notes. She didn't need to listen to them. She already knew the rhythm by heart. The first message would be soft. "Baby, come on, just talk to me." The second would be frustrated. "You are being dramatic, Nadia." The third would be sharp, accusatory, the mask fully dropped. "You know you cannot do this without me." She had heard every version of that script. She had memorized every inflection, every pause, every shift in tone, designed to make her feel guilty for needing something as basic as respect. She pressed her forehead against her knees and closed her eyes. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of traffic below and the faint buzz of her phone vibrating against wood. She thought about turning it off. She thought about throwing it out the window. She thought about answering, because even now, even after everything, some small, stubborn part of her still flinched when he called. Not out of love, out of habit, and habit, she was learning, could be just as hard to break. She did not answer. She sat there, wrapped around herself in the dim amber glow, and let the silence do what his voice never could. She let it hold her. Nadia met Kaylin at a friend's birthday dinner on a rooftop in July. The kind of night where the city skyline looked like it had been painted just for the occasion, and the air smelled like jasmine and cheap sangria. She almost didn't go. She had worked a double shift that day and her feet ached, and all she wanted was her couch and a bowl of cereal. But her friend Leah had begged her, "You never come out anymore. Just 1 hour, please." So she went. 1 hour turned into 3, and somewhere between the second round of drinks and a conversation about terrible first dates, she noticed him. Keelan was leaning against the railing with a glass in his hand, talking to someone she didn't know but clearly entertaining the entire group around him. He had one of those voices. Deep, unhurried, the kind that made you lean in even when he wasn't saying anything particularly important. His jawline looked like it had been drawn by someone who understood what confidence was supposed to look like. And when he laughed, it filled the space in a way that made everyone around him feel like they were in on something special. She wasn't trying to get his attention. She was standing near the bar, scrolling through her phone, half ready to call a car home. But he crossed the rooftop and appeared beside her like he had been heading in her direction all night. "You look like you are about to leave." She glanced up. "I was thinking about it." He smiled. "Don't, not yet. I just got here and I have a feeling you are the most interesting person on this roof." She laughed. "That is a bold assumption considering we have not said a single word to each other." He tilted his head. "That is why I came over. I figured I should fix that." They talked for 2 hours. He asked her questions no one else at the party would have thought to ask. "What do you think about when you cannot sleep? If you could live in any decade, which one? What is the last thing that made you cry?" Not surface-level small talk. He made her feel like the conversation mattered, like she mattered. He walked her to her car that night and didn't try to kiss her. He just stood there under the parking lot lights with his hands in his pockets and said, "I would really like to see you again, Nadia, if that is okay." She said yes before she even finished thinking about it. The early days felt like falling asleep in sunlight. Everything was warm and easy and just a little bit unreal. He called when he said he would. He showed up when he promised. He sent her songs at midnight with notes that said, "This reminded me of you," and she played them on repeat until they became the background score of her happiness. He made her feel chosen. And for a girl who had spent most of her life being overlooked, being chosen felt like everything. But love, she would later learn, does not always show you its full face in the beginning. Sometimes it wears a mask. And sometimes the mask is so beautiful, so perfectly crafted, that by the time it slips, you have already given away parts of yourself you cannot get back. The first time Killen cheated, Nadia found out by accident. She was lying on his couch on a Sunday afternoon while he was in the shower. His phone lit up on the coffee table. She wasn't looking for anything. She wasn't suspicious. She just glanced at the screen the way you glance at a clock, reflexively without thinking. But what she saw stopped her cold. A name she didn't recognize. A message she couldn't unsee. "Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" Her body went still before her mind caught up. She stared at the screen until the backlight faded and the words disappeared. But they didn't really disappear. They carved themselves into a part of her brain she would never be able to reach again. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, steam trailing behind him, he saw her face and froze. What happened? She held up his phone. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. What followed was the kind of performance only a man who has practiced remorse can deliver. His eyes went glassy. His voice cracked at exactly the right moments. He knelt in front of her and took her hands and pressed them to his chest like he was trying to make her feel his heartbeat. "I messed up. I know I messed up. It didn't mean anything, Nadia. I swear. You are the one I want. You are the only one I have ever wanted. Please, please do not leave me. I cannot lose you." She looked at his face and searched for the lie. She looked for the crack in the performance, the glint of manipulation behind the tears. But she didn't find it. Not because it wasn't there, but because she wasn't ready to see it. Something inside her fractured that afternoon, not her heart, her judgment. She chose to believe him because the alternative was too painful. She chose hope, or maybe denial. She told herself that love was supposed to be hard sometimes, that forgiveness was a sign of strength, that if she fought hard enough, held on tight enough, he would change. He did change, but not in the direction she hoped. The cruelty never arrived all at once. It seeped in slowly, like water through a crack in a ceiling you keep meaning to fix but never do. One day you look up and the whole structure is sagging, and you realize the damage has been happening for so long you forgot what the ceiling looked like before. Keelan never raised his voice. He never threw things. He never slammed doors. His violence was architectural, quiet, deliberate, load-bearing. He built cages out of casual remarks and locked the doors with smiles. It started with her job. Nadia was working at a mid-range restaurant at the time, pulling double shifts most weeks to cover rent and put a little aside for the future she was still trying to believe in. She was proud of the work, not because it was glamorous, but because it was hers. She earned every dollar, every tip, every small victory of a well-run section on a Friday night. Kellen didn't see it that way. He called it your little gig. He said it with a half smile, the kind that looks harmless on the surface but cuts like glass underneath. When she came home exhausted after a 10-hour shift, he wouldn't ask how her day was. He would sigh from the doorframe with his arms crossed and say something like, "I just think it is a little embarrassing, you know. You are smart enough for better, but you keep settling." It sounded like concern. It felt like contempt. When she skipped outings with his friends to save money, he rolled his eyes. "I should not have to date someone who counts every dollar like it is their last." When she mentioned wanting to take a hospitality management course, he laughed. "Why would you pay to learn how to carry plates?" She started adjusting. Quietly, unconsciously, the way a plant bends toward whatever light it can find. She spoke less when his friends were around. She dressed in whatever he approved of. She stopped mentioning her ideas. She stopped calling Leah as often. She stopped looking in the mirror because the woman staring back at her looked like someone she didn't recognize anymore. Someone smaller, dimmer, folded into a shape she had never chosen for herself. And then there were the reminders, the constant dripping reminders of the power imbalance he had constructed between them. "I could be with anyone, Nadia. Anyone. I chose you, remember that." He said it so often it stopped sounding like a compliment and started sounding like a threat. Like a landlord reminding a tenant that the lease could be revoked at any time. She remembered one night in particular. They were getting ready for dinner at a friend's apartment. She had spent an hour on her outfit, something she never used to do, but she had learned that how she looked reflected on him, and reflecting poorly on Keelan had consequences. She stepped out of the bedroom and stood in the hallway, waiting for him to notice. He glanced up from his phone, looked her over, and said, "That is what you are going with." Not a question, a verdict. She went back into the bedroom and changed. She didn't cry, she didn't argue, she just changed. And that was the part that scared her later, not his words, but how quickly she obeyed them, how natural it had become to erase herself and redraw the lines according to his specifications. There was another night, a Tuesday. He was on the couch watching something on his laptop, and she sat beside him and said, "I was thinking about applying for a position at that new place downtown. The one with the rooftop bar. It is upscale. It could be a real step up." He didn't look up. "You think they're going to hire you for a place like that?" She paused. "I mean, I have experience. I could at least try." He finally looked at her, and there it was. Not anger, something worse. Amusement. "Sure, babe. Go for it. Just do not be surprised when they see through you." She didn't apply. She didn't even realize she had been talked out of it until weeks later, when she saw the job listing again and felt a wave of something she couldn't name. Something between grief and recognition, like bumping into someone you used to be. That was the thing about Kellen. He didn't destroy her in one moment. He did it in 1,000 small ones. A raised eyebrow here, a sigh there, a carefully placed silence after she said something hopeful. He trained her to expect less, to want less, to be less. And the worst part was, she thanked him for it. She thanked him for staying, for choosing her, for being patient with someone who, in his words, still had a lot of growing to do. She didn't realize then that the growing he wanted was not growth at all. It was shrinking. He wanted her small enough to fit inside his ego and quiet enough to never challenge it. Love should never feel like an eraser. But for 3 years, that is exactly what it felt like. Every time she tried to draw a new version of herself, he wiped the page clean and handed her back the same dull pencil. "Stay in the lines, Nadia. Stay in the lines." The night that broke everything was supposed to be beautiful. Keelan had promised dinner. A real dinner, not takeout on the couch, not leftovers from her shift, but an actual evening out. He had said it casually the week before, almost like an afterthought. Friday. "You and me, that Italian place you keep talking about. My treat." She held on to those words all week. She replayed them during her shifts, between clearing plates and refilling glasses. She let herself get excited, which was something she hadn't done in a long time, because excitement required hope, and hope in that relationship had become a dangerous thing to carry. On Friday evening, she came home early, she showered, she dried her hair, She put on the emerald dress, the one Kellen once said made her look almost expensive. She hated that word, almost, like she was a rough draft of something he was still deciding whether to finish. But she wore the dress anyway, because she wanted him to see her. Really see her, not the waitress, not the girl who budgets, just her. She lit a candle on the kitchen table. She checked her reflection 3 times. She sat on the couch and waited. 7 o'clock came and went. She texted him, "Hey, are we still on for tonight?" No reply. 8 o'clock. She called. It rang out. 9 o'clock. She paced. She told herself he was stuck in traffic. His phone died. Something came up. She built a scaffold of excuses because the alternative, the truth, was a building she was not yet ready to watch collapse. 10 o'clock. 11. The candle burned halfway down, the wax pooling around the base like a small surrender. Just past midnight, his key scraped the lock. The door opened. He walked in with his collar wrinkled in places that told a story she didn't need to hear out loud. His jacket smelled of a cologne she had never bought him. His eyes were glassy, not from tears, but from the kind of evening he would never describe honestly. "Got held up," he muttered, brushing past her without stopping. She stood in the hallway, still in the emerald dress, still in the heels she had been wearing for 5 hours, and she felt something shift, not break, shift. Like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place, except the picture it completed was not the one she had been hoping for. She said nothing. She went to bed. She lay on her side, staring at the wall, and listened to the sound of him in the bathroom. Running water. Brushing teeth. The casual sounds of a man who had just come home from somewhere he should never have been, carrying on as if the woman in the next room hadn't just spent 5 hours believing she mattered. Her chest ached, but not from heartbreak, from clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't arrive gently. It kicks the door in and stands there, daring you to look away. She didn't sleep that night. She lay there, still and silent, watching the hours pass on the ceiling like the credits of a film she had stayed in far too long. The next morning, she did not cry. She woke up before him. She boiled water. She made tea. She drank it slowly, standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at a city that suddenly felt full of possibilities she had forgotten existed. Then she packed a bag, a small one, just the essentials, clothes, documents, the one photo of her mother she kept in her bedside drawer. She didn't take anything that belonged to them. She only took what belonged to her. She sat down at the kitchen table and waited for him to wake up. When he shuffled out 20 minutes later, groggy, yawning, scrolling through his phone before he even looked at her, she said it. "I am leaving." Kellen blinked. He looked up. He saw the bag by the door. "Leaving for where? Your shift starts at 5. "No, I am leaving you." For a moment, nothing. Then the laugh. Sharp, short, the kind of laugh designed to make someone feel foolish for standing up. "You are not serious." "I am." He leaned back in his chair and studied her the way someone studies a scratch on their car, an annoyance. A minor inconvenience, not a crisis. "You think you are too good for me now, because you pour wine for people who tip you out of pity." Her voice did not tremble. It did not crack. It came from a place in her chest she hadn't used in years. "No, I think I deserve better, because I loved you when no one else would. And you made me pay for it every single day." His smirk faded, not entirely, but enough for her to see the flicker behind his eyes. The flicker of a man who had just realized his bluff had been called. He stood, slowly, towering over her the way he always did when he wanted to feel in control. "You will come back. You always do." She looked up at him. Tears pooled in her eyes, catching the morning light, but they did not fall the way they used to. They did not fall for him. They fell for every version of herself she had silenced to keep him comfortable, for the girl who stopped calling her best friend, for the woman who stopped looking in mirrors, for the dream she buried because he told her it wasn't worth digging up. "No," she whispered, "not this time." She picked up the bag. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the handle, and for one breath, one single breath, she hesitated, not because she wanted to stay, but because leaving someone you have loved, even someone who hurt you, requires a kind of courage that doesn't feel brave in the moment. It just feels terrifying. She opened the door. She stepped through. She did not look back. The hallway was quiet. The elevator hummed. The morning sun hit her face as she stepped onto the sidewalk, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, the air tasted clean. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't have a plan. She had $43 in her checking account and a duffel bag, and a heart that felt like it had been through a war. But she also had something she hadn't had in 3 years. Herself. And that, she decided, was enough to start. It took Nadia 2 months to land on her feet. 2 months of sleeping on Leah's couch, of picking up extra shifts at a diner across town, of waking up at 5 in the morning and not getting home until midnight. 2 months of learning how to be alone again without feeling lonely, which is harder than anyone ever tells you. But she did it, quietly, stubbornly, one day at a time. She applied for a position at Waitress, the upscale bistro she had once dreamed about and been talked out of. It sat in the heart of the city's most exclusive district. Glass walls that caught the sunset like honey. Golden pendant lights hanging from exposed beams. The low hum of jazz threading through, murmured conversations, and the soft clink of crystal against porcelain. She almost didn't submit the application. She sat in front of her laptop for 20 minutes, staring at the form, hearing Keelan's voice in her head. You think they are going to hire you for a place like that? She hit send anyway. They called her back within a week. The interview lasted 45 minutes. The floor manager, a composed man in his 40s named Rowan, asked her one question that stuck with her. What do you think makes a great server? She thought for a moment. Making people feel like they matter, even if it is just for one meal. Rowan nodded. When can you start? Waitress became more than a job. It became a proving ground, a place where she could stand tall in a room full of people who had more money, more connections, more of everything, and still hold her own, not because she pretended to be one of them, but because she carried herself with something money couldn't buy. Presence, warmth, the kind of quiet dignity that made guests request her section twice. She learned the rhythms of the restaurant the way a musician learns a song. The tempo of a Friday rush, the silence between courses, the way a well-timed smile could turn a difficult table into a generous tip and a genuine thank you. She was rebuilding, not fast, not dramatically, but brick by brick, shift by shift, she was assembling a version of herself that nobody else had permission to tear down. The scars from Kellen were still there. She still flinched sometimes when a man raised his voice at the bar. She still checked her phone at night, half expecting to see his name. She still caught herself adjusting her posture, her tone, her words, out of a reflex trained by years of walking on glass. But she was healing, slowly, imperfectly, the way real healing always happens. And for a while, that was enough. The first time Kellen showed up at Waitress, Nadia had just finished setting a bottle of Sancerre at table 5. The evening shift was in full swing. The dining room hummed with polished laughter and low conversation. Candles flickered in their glass holders. The jazz was a little louder than usual, something with a saxophone that curled through the room like smoke. She heard his voice before she saw him. Well, well. Didn't think I would actually find you wiping down tables for real. Her stomach dropped. Not a free fall, more like the feeling of missing a step on a staircase you've walked 1,000 times. She turned slowly, and there he was. Keelan. Standing just inside the entrance in a designer jacket she knew he couldn't afford. Arms open, like he was waiting for applause. That grin on his face, the one that looked like charm from a distance but felt like a blade up close. Can I help you, sir? She said. Voice level, hands steady. She used the word sir deliberately, a wall she built with a single syllable. Don't go all professional on me now, babe. He stretched the word babe the way he always did, slow and loud, turning it from a name into a performance. He wanted the room to hear, and it did. A couple at the next table glanced over. A woman near the window paused mid-sip. I was just in the area, figured I would stop by, see how my ex is holding up in the wild. Nadia felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her face still. She had spent 3 years learning how to absorb impact without showing it. That skill didn't leave just because he did. You need to leave, she said. Come on. He raised his palms in mock innocence, his voice dripping with theatrical warmth. What? A guy can't say hello to someone who used to cry on his chest every time her tips were short. The words were designed to humiliate, and they were aimed with precision. He knew exactly what he was doing. He had chosen his moment carefully, just busy enough for the staff to be stretched thin, just quiet enough for every word to carry. Nadia didn't respond. She turned, walked toward the bar, and caught Rowan's eye. Her manager read her expression in half a second and moved through the dining room with the kind of calm authority that only comes from years of handling difficult people in expensive rooms. Sir Rowan positioned himself between Nadia and Killen with the ease of a man who had done this before. This is a place of business. You are welcome to dine as a guest, or you are welcome to leave. Killen raised his hands again. Easy. I am just talking to an old friend. We go way back. Then go way back, Rowan said without blinking. Out the door. Killen's grin faltered for half a second, just long enough for Nadia to see the crack in his composure. Then he shrugged, adjusted his jacket like a man who had been wrongly inconvenienced, and walked out. The door closed behind him. The restaurant resumed its rhythm. Nadia exhaled slowly, turned on her heel, and went back to work. Her hands didn't start shaking until she reached the kitchen. She pressed them flat against the stainless steel counter and held them there until they stopped. Then she straightened her apron, fixed her expression, and returned to the floor. Because that was what she did now. She showed up, she held steady, she refused to collapse in the spaces where he wanted her to. But standing in the warm glow of the dining room that night, moving between tables with her practiced smile, she couldn't shake the feeling coiling at the base of her spine. He would be back. He came back a week later, and he came prepared. It was a Tuesday evening, quieter than a weekend, but busy enough to keep the kitchen humming. Nadia was 3 hours into her shift when the hostess caught her arm near the service station. Table 9, the hostess said. He asked for your section specifically. Nadia's stomach tightened. She didn't ask who. She already knew. Killen was seated near the kitchen pass, sunglasses on even though the restaurant's lighting was dim and golden. He had ordered the most expensive bourbon on the menu and was swirling it in his glass with the confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he deserved to be anywhere. She approached the table. She had no choice. He was in her section and she had a job to do. Good evening, she began. Can I get you anything else? He didn't let her finish. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and held it up. The camera was already rolling. Say hi to the internet, Nadia. Her blood went cold. This is what I was dating for 3 years, he said, narrating directly into the lens. Look at her now, serving drinks like a proper little servant. He tilted the camera toward her, catching her face, her uniform, the name tag pinned to her chest. Can you believe this is the woman who thought she could walk away from me? A guest at the next table turned around in confusion. A couple near the window exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nadia reached for the phone. Killen, stop! He jerked it away, laughing. Don't touch me. You are on camera. It is a free country. Her chest tightened, not from embarrassment, though that was there too, from fury. A deep, trembling fury that lived somewhere beneath her ribs and vibrated against the walls of everything she had spent months rebuilding. She could see the same look in his eye, the one from every argument, every insult, every carefully placed silence that told her she was less. The look of a man who believed he still owned her story. You are pathetic, she said, quietly, not for the camera, for herself. His grin sharpened. I am successful, and you. He pointed at her name tag. You are wearing that. That is why I left you. He lowered the phone and tapped the screen. She watched the upload bar fill. She watched the word complete flash across the glass. He left without paying for the bourbon. That night, during her break, Nadia locked herself in the staff bathroom. She sat on the closed toilet lid, pressed both palms flat against her mouth, and held her breath until the trembling stopped. She didn't cry. She pressed everything down, tight and airless, the way you seal a wound before you have time to clean it. The video was already live. She could picture it circulating. Strangers who didn't know her name, laughing at a 15-second clip that erased every hour she had worked, every sacrifice she had made, every morning she had woken up and chosen to keep going even when going felt impossible. He hadn't come to gloat. He came to perform, to reduce her to content, to remind her that even after she left, he could still reach in and pull pieces of her dignity out like threads from a hem. Her 5 minutes were up. She stood. She ran cold water over her wrists. She looked at herself in the mirror under that unforgiving fluorescent light, and for a moment, the woman looking back at her seemed tired, worn thin, faded around the edges. But she was still standing. She straightened her posture. She smoothed her apron. She unlocked the door and walked back onto the floor. Because she had survived his love, she would survive his cruelty. And one day she would rise so far beyond him that the sound of his voice would feel like noise from a life that no longer belonged to her. She did not know that day was closer than she thought. If this story is touching you, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and tell us what you would do if you were in Nadia's shoes right now. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Trust me, the story is about to take a turn you will not see coming. Friday evenings at Verdure were a symphony of controlled chaos. The kind of night where every table was full, every glass was catching candlelight, and every member of staff moved like dancers, in a performance they had rehearsed 100 times without ever being told the choreography. Silver clinked against porcelain. Laughter rose and fell in polished waves. The kitchen hummed behind its swinging doors, sending out plates that looked like small works of art. Nadia had grown fluent in the rhythm, the pressure, the ache in her feet that started at hour 2 and didn't stop until she kicked off her shoes at home. She had learned how to carry herself through it all, calm on the outside, purposeful, present, the kind of server guests remembered not because she was loud, but because she made them feel like they were the only table in the room. But nothing she had learned, nothing she had survived, prepared her for what walked through the door at 8:17 on a Friday night. Kellen. Again. This time he wasn't dressed for subtlety. He wore an oversized designer tracksuit in a color that screamed for attention and gold jewelry that clinked and jingled with every step, like a man who had studied what wealth looked like from the outside and decided volume was the same as value. His ego entered the room before the rest of him. Customers near the door turned slightly, not in admiration, but in the way people turn toward a sound they can't quite identify, something between curiosity and alarm. Nadia saw him from across the dining room. Her stomach didn't just drop, it folded in on itself. Not again. Not tonight. He strutted toward her section with his phone already raised, the camera already rolling, the performance already in motion. "There she is," he announced, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Back at it, my ex, the queen of minimum wage." Nadia stood still. She could see herself on his screen, small, uniformed, framed like a punchline. "She dumped me," he said, turning to no one and everyone at the same time. "Can you believe that?" Claimed she wanted peace of mind. "But let us be real. She could not handle being with a man like me." He swiveled the camera toward himself, grinning like a man who had practiced this in the mirror. "I mean, look at this place. This is where she ended up." Nadia could feel her coworkers watching. A busser hovered 3 feet away, frozen, unsure if he should move or stay. The hostess stood behind the podium, looking horrified, but paralyzed. Rowan was on the far side of the restaurant, handling a wine spillage at table 12, too far to intervene immediately. She was on her own. She took one breath. Slow, controlled, the kind of breath that sounds like nothing but carries everything. "Sir," she said, voice steady, eyes locked on his, "you need to leave." "Sir," he repeated, mocking, "I am sir now. You were calling me baby 3 months ago." "I am working." "Yeah." He looked her up and down with theatrical disgust. "It shows. You know what? I should actually thank you. Breaking up with you was the best decision I ever made. I have upgraded. Meanwhile, you are still bussing tables. Life is funny like that, isn't it?" Before she could respond, before she could summon the words that were building like pressure behind a dam, a voice cut through the noise. Low, smooth, deliberate. The kind of voice that doesn't need volume to command an entire room. "Babe." Nadia turned. And there he was. Standing just a few feet behind her, a man she had never spoken to, tall, broad-shouldered, late 30s, wearing a midnight navy suit that fit him the way armor fits a knight, precise, intentional, and unmistakably powerful. His face was calm, his posture was relaxed. But his eyes, dark and steady, carried the quiet intensity of someone who had already assessed the situation and made his decision before anyone noticed he was watching. He stepped closer, not rushed, not aggressive, just present. "I have been looking for you," he said. His voice softened, but it didn't lose its weight. "You look beautiful tonight." The world stopped. Not metaphorically, it actually stopped. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. The jazz in the background seemed to dip, as if even the music was leaning in to see what would happen next. Nadia's lips parted. She had never seen this man before. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he did. But something in his eyes, warm and steady and completely unafraid, told her everything she needed to understand. He was improvising, and he was saving her. She blinked once, then something clicked. A decision made not with her mind, but with something deeper. Something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Sorry," she said, stepping away from Keelan and toward the stranger. "I got pulled away. I meant to meet you earlier." The man extended his hand, not possessive, not theatrical, just offered, like an open door. She took it. His hand was warm, steady, grounding in a way that had nothing to do with force and everything to do with presence. Keelan's expression cracked. The smirk that had been glued to his face since he walked in splintered at the edges. His phone lowered an inch. "What the hell is this?" The man turned to face him. His expression didn't change. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I am her boyfriend, and you are interrupting her evening." Keelan scoffed. His laughter sounded like a car trying to start in the cold. "Boyfriend? Since when?" The man smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It stayed on his lips like a polite warning, the kind you give once, since you started embarrassing yourself in public. The silence in the restaurant was absolute, not a whisper, not a clink. Just the low, distant hum of the city beyond the glass and the sound of a man's pride collapsing in real time. Kellen looked at the stranger, then at Nadia, then back at the stranger. His eyes dropped to the man's wrist, to the watch that sat there, understated but unmistakable. The kind of watch you don't buy. The kind you inherit or earn by building something most people only read about in magazines. Something inside Kalen shifted. Not his ego, his calculation. He was sizing up the situation the way he always did, not through emotion, but through power. And for the first time, the math didn't work in his favor. Without another word, he shoved his phone into his pocket, muttered something under his breath that nobody cared enough to hear, and turned toward the door. His gold chains jingled on the way out. The tracksuit caught the candlelight one last time, and then he was gone. The door swung shut behind him. The restaurant exhaled. Conversations returned slowly, like tide creeping back across sand. A woman at the window table whispered to her husband. The busser finally moved. The hostess let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like a year. Nadia stood in the center of the dining room, still holding the stranger's hand. She looked up at him. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know what to say." He gave a small shake of his head. "You do not owe me anything. I have seen him in here before. Figured tonight was the night to step in." She searched his face, looking for arrogance, looking for pity, looking for the kind of performance she had learned to recognize from men who did favors and expected receipts. She found none of it. Just calm, just kindness, just a man who saw something wrong and decided to stand in the way of it. "You really pulled that off," she said softly. He chuckled. "I am a fast learner." "Who are you?" she asked. He offered his hand again, this time for a proper introduction. Julian Ashford. The name rippled through her memory. She had seen it somewhere. Headline she scrolled past on break. A tech feature. A business profile. Something about startups and acquisitions and a quiet man who built empires without ever being the loudest voice in the room. He saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes and smiled gently. "Do not worry, I am not here to make a scene. I just did not like watching someone try to tear down a woman who clearly deserves more. She did not know what surprised her more, that he came to her rescue, or that he did it without once making her feel like she needed rescuing. She released his hand, smoothed her apron, and gestured toward a table by the window. "Can I at least get you a proper seat?" she said. He smiled. "I would like that." As the restaurant settled back into its rhythm, as the candles flickered and the jazz resumed and the night remembered how to breathe, Nadia guided Julian to the quiet table near the window, where the city lights poured in like liquid gold. She set a menu in front of him. Their eyes met for a moment longer than protocol required. And for the first time in a very long time, Nadia felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Not safety, exactly. Not hope. Something in between. Something fragile and warm and just reckless enough to make her think that maybe, the worst part of her story was already behind her. She didn't know yet how wrong she was. Because 3 miles away, in a dim apartment that smelled of stale cologne and bruised pride, Keelan was staring at his phone screen with trembling hands and a jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. And he was already planning what he would do next. Keelan could not sleep. He lay on his back in the dark with his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, the way you stare at something when you are not really looking at it, but you cannot bring yourself to look at anything else. The sheets were tangled around his legs. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles in his neck ached. And every time he closed his eyes, the same image played behind his lids like a film stuck on repeat. Nadia, walking away from him, reaching for that man's hand, taking it. Holding it like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she had been waiting for exactly that hand her entire life and had simply never known it until now. And the man. That tall, composed, impossibly calm man in the Navy suit who looked at Keelan the way you look at a stain on a tablecloth, not with anger, not with intimidation, with mild inconvenience, like Keelan was something to be cleaned up and forgotten about. "I am her boyfriend, and you are interrupting her evening." The words played over and over, not because they were clever, but because of how easily they were said. No hesitation, no performance, just a man stating a fact, with the quiet certainty of someone who has never once needed to raise his voice to be believed. Keelan sat up in bed. The room was dark, except for the dull blue glow of the city leaking through the blinds. He grabbed his phone off the nightstand and opened the video he had posted earlier. The one of Nadia at the restaurant. The caption read, "Ex turned waitress. Now she serves people who are out of her league." It had gotten traction. Hundreds of views. Dozens of comments. Most of them cruel. Written by strangers who didn't know her name or her story, or the way she used to sing off-key while making breakfast on Sunday mornings. He scrolled through the comments. Some were laughing, some were tagging friends. A few were calling him out, telling him he was pathetic, telling him to move on. He ignored those. He watched the video again, then a third time. And somewhere between the second and third replay, the victory he had felt when he uploaded it evaporated completely. In its place was something hollow, something that tasted like rust. He wasn't watching the video to feel powerful anymore. He was watching it to look for the man, to look for the moment, to find the frame where everything shifted and figure out how to shift it back. He opened a new browser tab, then another, then another. He searched for the restaurant, pulled up tagged photos, cross-referenced faces with names. He clicked through LinkedIn profiles, company websites, press features. He was not looking for closure. He was hunting. And then he found him. Julian Ashford. The name appeared first in a business profile, CEO, tech investor, founder of a venture capital firm that had backed some of the fastest growing startups in the country. Keelan clicked through to a Forbes article from a few years back, Top 30 Under 30. A profile that described a man who built his first company at 25, sold it for millions, and then quietly disappeared from the spotlight for several years before re-emerging as one of the most respected names in private investment. There were photos, sparse, professional. Julian at a charity gala, Julian shaking hands with a senator, Julian standing beside a building with his name discreetly engraved on the cornerstone. Keelan kept scrolling. Properties in 3 countries, art donations in his name, board positions, a philanthropic footprint that stretched across continents, and all of it achieved with a kind of quiet, invisible power that made Kaylin's designer tracksuit and borrowed jewelry feel like what they were. Costumes. He slammed the laptop shut. The room went dark again. He stood and paced, his bare feet slapping the cold floor. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides like he was trying to grab hold of something that kept slipping through his fingers. This could not be happening. She could not have gone from his scorn to that man's arm in a matter of weeks. Nadia. The girl he had filmed in a uniform carrying trays. The girl who used to cry in the bathroom when her tips came up short. The girl he had trained to believe she was lucky to be chosen by him. She was with Julian Ashford. How? The question circled his mind like a dog chasing its tail. Not because he wanted an answer, but because the answer, the real one, the one buried under all the jealousy and outrage and wounded pride, was something he could not afford to face. She didn't just leave you. She rose above you. She didn't fall apart when you walked away. She built something. She became someone. And you are still the same man, standing in the same dark room, wondering why the world stopped revolving around you. By morning, Keelan had not slept. He sat on the edge of his bed with his phone in his hand, and his eyes bloodshot, and his ego throbbing like a wound that refused to close. He told himself he was not jealous. He told himself he was curious. He told himself he just needed to understand how a man like Julian Ashford, polished, respected, impossibly wealthy, could be interested in a girl like Nadia. But in the quiet corners of his mind, in the places he never visited voluntarily, the truth sat waiting. She outgrew you, and you cannot forgive her for it. The night after Julian stepped in at the restaurant stayed with Nadia in a way she did not expect. It was not his appearance that lingered, not his suit or his watch or the way the dining room seemed to rearrange itself around his presence. It was the way he looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her, like she was the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. And not because of what she looked like or what she could offer, but because of something quieter, something he recognized in her that she was still learning to recognize in herself. The next day she went to work expecting the evening to feel ordinary again. She expected the memory of Julian to fade the way strange encounters do, like a dream you can recall in pieces but never quite reconstruct. She tied her apron, checked her tables, and began her shift with the same quiet discipline she had carried every night since she started at Verdure. Then the hostess appeared at her elbow, a barely contained smile pulling at the corners of her mouth. "Table 6. He asked for you specifically." Nadia looked up. "Who?" The hostess raised an eyebrow. "Julian. Tall. Dark suit. Looks like he built the sidewalk outside and just came in to check on it." Nadia's pulse skipped. She smoothed her apron, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and crossed the dining room. He was seated at the window again. The same spot. A single espresso sat in front of him, untouched. In his hands was a worn paperback, some old philosophy text with creased corners and a spine that had clearly been opened 100 times. He looked up as she approached, and the smile that crossed his face was not the kind designed to impress. It was the kind that arrives without permission. "I was hoping you would be working tonight," he said. She tilted her head, not used to saving people more than once. He chuckled, setting the book down. "I was not saving you. I was stepping into a story that was never his to narrate." The words landed softly and stayed. She folded her hands in front of her. "Well, thank you. For last night. That could have gone really badly." He shook his head. "You handled it better than most people would. Better than I would have." She was not used to that, being spoken to with admiration instead of appraisal. Most men she had known looked at her the way you look at a menu, evaluating, deciding, calculating what they could get and what it would cost them. Julian looked at her the way you look at a painting in a gallery you walked into by accident, with stillness, with attention, with the understanding that what you are seeing deserves more time than a passing glance. "So," she said, trying to keep her voice light, "are you planning to make this a regular thing, showing up, sipping espresso, watching me work?" He tilted his head. "If you do not mind." She couldn't stop the small smile that tugged at her lips. "I do not mind." And that was how it started. He came in once a week, then twice, always polite, always asking for her section. He never lingered too long or stayed too late. He never asked personal questions before she was ready to give personal answers. He simply showed up, ordered his espresso, read his book, and waited for whatever conversation she had time to offer between tables. And the conversations grew, slowly, carefully, like roots finding their way through new soil. She learned that he had built his first company from a studio apartment not much bigger than the one she had shared with Keelan. That he sold it not because he wanted to cash out, but because he wanted to learn what it felt like to start over. That he disappeared from the business world for 2 years after the sale, spent time traveling alone, reading, volunteering at a literacy program in a part of the city most investors never visited. He did not talk about money unless she asked. He did not name drop or reference his portfolio or flash his credentials like a badge. He talked about ideas, about books, about the way certain restaurants felt like living rooms and others felt like stages. He asked her questions that no one had ever thought to ask. What is the hardest part of this job that nobody sees? She thought about it. The invisibility. You can be amazing at what you do and no one remembers your name. They remember the food. They remember the wine. They remember the atmosphere. But the person who made all of that happen, she shrugged. You just disappear into the experience. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I do not think you disappear. I think the people who do not notice you are simply not paying attention. She felt something shift in her chest. Not dramatic, not seismic, just a quiet click like a key turning in a lock she had forgotten was there. He never pushed. He never made her feel rushed or pressured or like she owed him something for his time. He simply kept showing up, kept listening, kept being exactly what she had not realized she needed. Safe. 2 weeks after his first return visit, he set down his espresso cup and looked at her with something between nervousness and certainty. There is a gallery opening this Friday evening, he said. Contemporary photography. A friend of mine is exhibiting. I would really like to take you, if you are comfortable. She paused. A gallery. With him. In his world. You sure you want to be seen in public with a waitress making $12 an hour, she said, half joking. Half not. He did not laugh. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes steady, his voice quiet but absolutely certain. I want to be seen with a woman who knows how to carry herself with more grace than anyone in any room I have ever been in. I want to be seen with you. The words didn't land like a compliment. They landed like a conviction, like something he had thought about carefully and decided to say only because he meant every syllable. She said yes. That Friday, Julian picked her up in a dark sedan. He did not make a production of it. No flowers, no champagne, no gestures, designed to remind her of the gap between their bank accounts. He opened the door for her, told her she looked stunning, and drove with the windows cracked and the radio playing something soft she didn't recognize but immediately loved. She had borrowed a black dress from Leah. Simple, elegant, nothing extravagant. When she stepped out of her building and saw his face, she braced herself for the thing men like Kaylin always said. You clean up nice, as if her default state was something that needed cleaning. Julian said, I have never seen anything more beautiful. And the way he said it, without performance, without calculation, just a man telling the truth because the truth was worth telling, made her believe it was not about the dress. The gallery was buzzing. Photographers, critics, influencers with cameras pointed at everything and everyone. The walls were lined with black and white portraits, faces caught mid-breath, mid-laugh, mid-cry. Each one felt like a window into someone else's private moment. Nadia moved through the space the way she moved through the restaurant, with curiosity, with attention, with genuine interest. She did not pretend to understand everything. She asked questions. Real ones. Not the kind designed to impress, but the kind that came from actually wanting to know. She stood in front of one photograph for a long time. It was a portrait of an elderly woman sitting on a park bench, her face turned toward the sun, her eyes closed, her expression somewhere between peace and grief. The caption read, After 60 years, she finally sat still. Nadia stared at it until her eyes burned. Julian appeared beside her. That one got you, he said quietly. She nodded. I think I know what that feels like. Running for so long you forget what it is like to just stop. He was silent, not because he didn't have something to say, but because he understood that some moments deserve space, not commentary. Throughout the evening, Julian introduced her to people, not as his date, not as the woman on his arm. He introduced her as someone very important to me. Every time he said it, she noticed the way people's eyes shifted. Some were surprised. Some were confused. A few looked envious. But Julian didn't notice any of them. He only noticed her. After the gallery, they walked along a quiet path near the waterfront. The city lights shimmered on the surface of the water like scattered coins. The air was cool and smelled like salt and possibility. They walked in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't need filling, the kind that says more than most conversations. Then Nadia stopped walking. She turned to him. Why me? She asked. Julian looked out at the water. He didn't answer right away. She could see him choosing his words, not because he was calculating, but because the answer mattered to him, and he wanted to give it the weight it deserved. You did not try to prove anything, he said finally. You just were. In a room full of people performing, you were the only one who was just present, honest, real. He paused. And in a world that constantly asks you to be more or less or different, meeting someone who is just themselves felt like something I could not walk away from. She didn't know what to say. Words felt too small for the feeling expanding inside her chest, so she reached for his hand. He took it, gently, steadily. Not to save her, not to claim her, just to say, I am here. They stood there on the waterfront with the city humming behind them and the water lapping softly against the stones, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Nadia felt something she thought Keelan had permanently taken from her. She felt worthy. Keelan's final visit to Verdor happened on a Thursday. He had spent weeks spiraling, scrolling through Julian's sparse social media at 3 a.m, rewatching his own viral video of Nadia and feeling nothing but the hollow echo of a victory that never was. He had seen the tagged photos from the gallery opening. Nadia in a black dress, Julian beside her with his hand resting gently on the small of her back, both of them looking at something off camera, smiling, not for the audience, for each other. It ate at him, not like jealousy, like something deeper and uglier. Like the realization that the story he had been telling himself, the one where Nadia was nothing without him, where she would crumble and crawl back, where his rejection of her was proof of his superiority, that story was a lie. And the truth was standing in a gallery beside a man who saw her the way Keelan never could. So he made a decision, the way men like him always do when control slips too far from their hands. He told himself it was about closure, about getting the last word, about making sure she knew he was still somebody. But it was never about closure, it was about control. And Kellen had been losing it since the night she picked up that duffel bag and walked out of his apartment without looking back. He arrived at the restaurant at 7:30. The dining room was steady, not packed, not empty, just the low-level hum of a weekday evening, candles lit, jazz playing, the familiar rhythm of silverware and conversation. Nadia was moving between tables. Her steps were fluid and confident in a way they had not been when he first started showing up. Something about her had changed in the past few weeks. She stood taller. She spoke with more ease. Her smile was not practiced anymore, it was real, and that made it worse. She noticed him the moment he walked through the door. Her expression did not shift. No fear, no surprise, no panic, just recognition. The kind you give to a chapter you have already read and have no interest in rereading. She excused herself from the table she was attending and walked toward him with her arms at her sides and her voice low and direct. You need to leave. Keelan planted his feet. I am not going anywhere. You owe me a conversation. I owe you nothing. He laughed, loud, bitter. The kind of laugh that has nothing to do with humor and everything to do with pain you refuse to name. You think you are someone now, because you hang off some rich guy's arm. You think that changes what you are. You are still the same girl who cried when her card got declined, still waiting tables, still counting pennies. Don't act like you are royalty now. His voice had risen. not shouting but loud enough to pull the attention of every nearby table. A couple at the window paused mid-conversation. A server near the bar set down a bottle and turned. The hostess gripped her podium like a railing. Nadia stood still. She did not retreat. She did not shrink. She stood exactly where she was, feet planted, shoulders level, eyes locked on his. And then, for the second time in her life, a voice arrived from behind her, not loud, not aggressive, just present, the way a wall is present, the way gravity is present. "Is there a problem here?" Julian stepped into the light like he had materialized from the architecture of the room itself. Charcoal suit tonight, clean lines, hands relaxed at his sides. His expression was not angry. It was something more precise than anger. It was clarity, the kind of clarity that does not need volume to make itself understood. Kellen froze. He had not expected this. He had rehearsed his confrontation with Nadia, not with the man who made him feel like a footnote in a story he used to think he authored. Julian moved beside Nadia. He placed his hand on her lower back, light enough that she could step away if she wanted to. She didn't. She leaned into it, not because she needed support, because she wanted it. And there is a difference between those two things that most people never learn. "She asked you to leave," Julian said. "That should have been the end of it." Kellen scoffed, but the scoff had a tremor in it now, a crack that hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. "Oh, so now the rich guy steps in. You think money gives you the right to tell me what to do?" "No," Julian replied, "but your behavior gives me the right to stop you." The room was still. Completely, absolutely still. No silverware. No jazz. Just the sound of two men standing 3 feet apart and one of them realizing, slowly, painfully, that he had already lost. Julian did not step closer. He did not raise his fist. He did not posture or puff his chest or do any of the things Keelan would have done if the roles had been reversed. He simply spoke the truth with the precision of a blade and the calm of a man who had nothing to prove. You did not lose Nadia because she found someone wealthier. You lost her because you never once saw her worth. You had something rare, something honest, something real, and you spent every day trying to make it small enough to fit inside your ego. That is not love. That is captivity. And she freed herself. The words landed in the silence like stones dropped into still water. Each one rippled outward. Each one touched something. Kellen's face reddened. His nostrils flared, his fists clenched at his sides. But the fire that used to fuel him, the arrogance, the certainty, the unshakable belief that he was the protagonist of every room he entered, that fire had been burning on fumes for weeks. And now, standing in a room full of strangers who were watching him with the quiet pity you reserve for someone who does not yet know they have already lost, the flame went out. He looked at Nadia, one last time, searching her face for the old version of her, the one who flinched, the one who folded, the one who cried quietly and apologized for having feelings. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked at him the way you look at a photograph of someone you used to know, with distance, with understanding, with the gentle finality of someone who has already closed the book and placed it back on the shelf. "I do not hate you, Keelan," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of every silent night, every swallowed insult, every dream she buried at his request. "I do not hate you, but I pity you. Because you are still standing in the same place I left you, and I have moved so far from there, I can barely see it anymore." The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. Kellen opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He looked at Julian. He looked at Nadia. He looked at the faces watching him from every corner of the restaurant, faces that held no admiration, no fear, no respect, just quiet, unanimous recognition of a man who had come to assert power and found he had none left. He turned. He walked toward the door. His gold chains didn't jingle this time. His tracksuit didn't catch the light. He moved through the restaurant like a shadow retreating from a room that had finally been filled with light. The door closed behind him. And this time Nadia knew he would not come back. We are almost at the end of this story, family. But trust me, the best part is still coming. If this story has moved you, hit that like button right now and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. And if you have not subscribed yet, What are you waiting for? Join the family. We have so much more coming. The restaurant resumed its rhythm that evening, but Nadia did not. Not fully. She finished her shift the way she always did, professional, attentive, warm. But there was something different about the way she moved through the final hours. Lighter, like she had been carrying a bag of stones for years, and someone had finally asked if she wanted to set it down. After the last table cleared, she found Julian waiting near the entrance. He was leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets, his suit jacket unbuttoned, looking less like a CEO and more like a man who simply wanted to walk someone home. "You did not have to wait," she said. "I know," he replied. "I wanted to." They walked together through the quiet streets. The city had that late-night hush that only exists in the hour between the last bars closing and the first delivery trucks rolling out. The air was cool. The streetlights painted soft circles on the pavement. "You know," she said after a while, "he is not the reason I was afraid." Julian looked at her. "I was afraid because I started believing what he said about me. That I was not enough. That my job was a punchline. That wanting something more made me delusional." She paused. The hardest part was not leaving him. It was learning to stop hearing his voice in my head every time I tried to do something for myself. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I noticed about you the first night I saw you in that restaurant, before any of the drama, before I even knew his name?" "What?" "You were carrying 3 plates, and you set them down so gently, like each one mattered, like the people sitting at that table mattered. And I thought, there is someone who pays attention to the world in a way most people have forgotten how to." She felt tears building behind her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "Not yet." He continued, "You were never small, Nadia. You were just surrounded by someone who needed you to be." She reached for his hand, he took it, and they walked the rest of the way in silence, fingers interlocked, footsteps synchronized. 2 people who had found something neither of them had been looking for. 6 months later, the Copper Vine opened on a tree-lined street on the east side of the city. It was not the kind of place that demanded attention. It earned it. Warm light poured through floor-to-ceiling glass panels. The interior was a blend of reclaimed wood tables, deep forest green cushions, and exposed brick walls hung with artwork by local creators who Nadia had personally invited to display their work. The menu was handwritten daily on a chalkboard near the entrance, and it changed with the seasons because Nadia believed food should feel alive, not formulaic. There was a small reading nook in the corner with mismatched chairs and a shelf of donated books. There was a community board near the register where local events, poetry readings, and support group meetings were pinned alongside business cards and handwritten thank you notes. There was a sign behind the counter that read, "You belong here." It was the first thing Nadia had hung on the walls before the furniture even arrived. The journey to opening day had not been smooth. It had been months of late nights hunched over spreadsheets, of second-guessing, of waking up at 4 in the morning with her heart racing and her mind listing every reason this could fail. She had shown the idea to Julian on a Tuesday night, sitting cross-legged on the floor of her apartment with a messy stack of napkin sketches and a notebook filled with recipes and floor plans and scribbled questions she didn't yet have answers to. "I have always wanted to create a space," she said, flipping through the pages. "Something small, something real. Real food, real coffee, local art on the walls. A place where people who feel like they do not belong anywhere can walk in and feel like they are home." She looked up at him, bracing for the pivot. The pivot she had been trained to expect. The moment where the other person's face shifts from listening to calculating. Where they ask about margins, overhead, competition. Where they turn a dream into a spreadsheet and let the numbers decide if it is worth believing in. Julian did not pivot. He leaned forward. He looked at the sketches. He read the notes. He asked her questions, but not about profitability. He asked what the color palette would be. He asked which local artist she had in mind. He asked what she would name the first signature dish and why. Then he said, "That sounds like exactly the kind of place this city needs." She waited for the catch. There was always a catch. "I could invest," he said. "No strings, no pressure, no conditions, just support. Or I can step back entirely and let you handle everything on your own. I trust you either way." She stared at him. You would do that for me." "No," he said, and the way he smiled made her chest ache in the best possible way. "I would do that with you." He did not take credit for the copper vine. He did not put his name on anything. He helped her navigate the legal framework, connected her with contractors and suppliers, and sat beside her during the long nights when the doubt crept in. But every decision was hers. Every choice was hers. Every risk was hers. And when she faltered, when the fear whispered that Kellen was right and she was not built for this, Julian did not motivate her with speeches. He simply said, "You have already survived the hardest thing you will ever go through. This is just building, and you know how to build." On opening day, the line stretched past the door and around the corner. Friends from Verdure came. Regulars she used to serve stopped by and told her they always knew she would do something like this. Leah was there before the doors even opened, standing at the front of the line with mascara already running, holding a hand-painted sign that said, "She did it." Local bloggers posted photos. A food critic from the city paper stopped in unannounced and ordered 3 things off the menu, each one prepared by the small kitchen team Nadia had personally trained. The review that ran the following week called The Copper Vine a love letter to community, the kind of place that reminds you why restaurants exist in the first place. And Julian. He stood in the back of the room near the reading nook, with a cup of coffee in his hand and a look on his face that was not pride exactly. It was something deeper. It was the expression of a man watching someone he loves become the person they were always supposed to be. Nadia moved through the space like she had been born in it, greeting guests, tasting sauces, adjusting a crooked frame on the wall, laughing with the barista, kneeling beside a toddler who had spilled juice on the floor and telling him it was no big deal with a warmth that made the child's mother tear up. No apron, no name tag, no uniform. Just Nadia, whole, free, standing in a room she built with her own hands and her own heart and her own stubborn, unbreakable belief that she was worth more than the story someone else tried to write for her. Kellen did not show up, but she knew he had seen the posts. The grand opening had made the rounds, shared by a few well-known names. Her name was on the sign. Her face was in the photos. Her story was in the captions. She imagined him scrolling through them in the dark, jaw tight, eyes narrow, trying to understand how the girl he once filmed in a uniform, the girl he called a peasant, the girl he tried to turn into a punchline, had built something so beautiful it made strangers on the internet stop scrolling and say, "I need to visit this place." She imagined him staring at the screen the way he once stared at her, with disbelief, with regret, with the slow, unbearable recognition that the woman he tried to destroy had not only survived, she had flourished. But she did not think about him long. She had a restaurant to run, guests to welcome, a life to live, and it was a beautiful one. That evening, after the last customer left and the kitchen fell silent and the lights dimmed to a warm amber glow, Nadia sat on the window ledge of the Copper Vine, with her shoes kicked off and a warm mug of chamomile between her palms. The street outside was quiet. The trees swayed gently in the evening breeze. Through the glass, she could see the reflection of the room behind her, the tables, the chairs, the art on the walls, the chalkboard menu in her own handwriting, and it looked like a painting of a life she once thought she did not deserve. Julian appeared through the kitchen door carrying 2 paper bags, their favorite takeout from a Thai place 3 blocks over. The one with the green curry that always made her eyes water, and the coconut rice that tasted like a hug. "Figured you would not want to cook tonight," he said. She laughed, the kind of laugh that starts in the belly and rises like warm air. "You figured right." He sat beside her on the ledge. They opened the bags. They ate with plastic forks and paper napkins, and the quiet contentment of 2 people who had found something neither of them expected and both of them needed. The city hummed outside, a siren in the distance, a dog barking somewhere down the block, the faint sound of music from a bar 2 streets over. "You did it," Julian said softly, not in the voice of a man taking credit, in the voice of a man bearing witness. Nadia looked around the room, her dream, her name on the door, her story, written in her own hand. "We did it," she said. He smiled but didn't correct her. He knew better. Because the truth, the real truth, the one they both understood without needing to say it, was this: she did it. Not because of Julian, but alongside him. Not because a man rescued her, but because she rescued herself, and then a man showed up who had the wisdom to let her. Julian had not saved Nadia. He had simply met her on the road she was already walking. He matched her pace. He carried nothing for her that she could carry herself. He offered his hand, not to lead, but to say, "I am beside you." And that is a different kind of love than the one she had known before. It is the kind that does not ask you to shrink. It does not ask you to perform. It does not ask you to earn your place at the table. It simply pulls up a chair and says, "Sit. You belong here." And she did. Later that night, as they locked up and stepped into the cool air, Nadia turned and looked at the sign one last time. The Copper Vine. She had chosen the name months ago, sitting on the floor of her apartment at 2 in the morning, surrounded by crumpled paper and cold coffee. She had gone through dozens of options. Some were clever, some were elegant, none of them felt right. And then she thought about vines, about the way they grow, not straight up like trees, rigid and towering and loud about their height, but sideways, along walls, through cracks, around obstacles, quietly, persistently, without permission. She thought about copper, how it starts bright and shiny, and how, over time, it ages into something richer, something deeper, something that carries its history in its color. The copper vine, a thing that grows through cracks and becomes more beautiful with time. That, she decided, was her. She looked at the sign, glowing softly under the streetlight, and she felt a wave of something that had no name. Something bigger than pride, bigger than relief, bigger than happiness. It was the feeling of standing inside a life you built from the wreckage of one that tried to bury you. The feeling of planting yourself somewhere real after years of being uprooted. The feeling of looking in a mirror and finally recognizing the woman staring back at you. Not because she is new, but because she is the version of you that was there all along, waiting beneath the silence, waiting beneath the apologies, waiting beneath every "I am not enough" you were taught to believe. Nadia took one last breath of the night air. She squeezed Julian's hand. She turned away from the sign and toward the street that stretched ahead of her, lit by soft light and full of the kind of quiet that only comes after a storm has passed. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She already knew who she was. We have come to the end of today's story, family. I hope it moved you the way it moved us to tell it. If you felt something while listening, do us a favor. Leave a like. Drop a comment telling us which part hit you the hardest. Share this story with someone who needs to remember what they are worth. And subscribe to Untold Desires by Mr. Lewis so you never miss a story that stays with you. Until next time, keep living, keep growing, and never let anyone else write your story. That pen belongs to you.